This week, news broke that an unknown individual attempted to extort Binance, the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange, for 300 Bitcoin, a figure worth nearly $3.5 million. The deal was this: 300 Bitcoin in exchange for a trove of identifying customer data dating back to 2018. Pay the funds, and the hacker would agree to hand over not just the data, but information on the individual who hacked the exchange for $40 million in May using the data. The individual claimed to be a white hat hacker who had obtained identifying data hacking the still unknown Binance thief. The real story, however, was a lot more complex. Far from FUD, it's the closest look anyone has ever gotten at what a negotiation between a hacker and a crypto exchange looks like in practice. It also reveals new details that, while unconfirmed, suggest how Binance lost nearly $40 million in Bitcoin in May in a large-scale breach. CoinDesk not only spoke to the individual, but engaged with him in good faith to verify and hand over the information, which they said they were attempting to use to shine a light on the exchange's security issues. We've published an in-depth story on our investigation and how the talks went down. Let's go inside the story.
So I got my first message from the hacker Natov Platon, aka Gen M, aka Amate, on July 17th. I was writing a story about how the hackers were moving Binance Bitcoins from wallet to wallet. It looked like almost like money laundering, going into these different wallets. This other company called CoinFirm was telling me all about it. We did a bunch of reports, and this guy sends me an email and he says, "Hey, look, I know the inside story." And I figure, okay, that should be fun, so I get him on Telegram. I didn't act immediately at the time because I had heard about the leaks that Binance claimed were floating around that suggested either a phishing attack or a third-party hack. Then Platon sent me a few more pieces of information that looked far more suspicious. Platon also sent me Java code that could have been used by the hackers to move cash out of client accounts using the right API keys. So I had a few folks that I know who could actually read Java and actually could understand these APIs, dig through the code, and it became clear that while there were some important parts to this code missing, including logs and including lists of all these API keys that someone had stolen, this code could have been used to buy, send, and sell crypto on someone's behalf, given the right circumstances. So the biggest question that people had was this old information, KYC information that was taken from a third party or through some phishing system, or was it brand new stuff? So what I have right now is I have 636 pieces of information. Most of it was actually shot on around February or March in 2018. I asked Platon recently, do you have anything from 2019? He kind of went silent. It's entirely feasible that this was from that leak, but what's interesting, and the reason why I got interested in it is because the leak was associated with a bunch of metadata as well. So I was able to look at the photos, and there was actually text files that consisted of a reviewer, somebody's name, and dates, and actually an email address for this person who was in this photo. And all these photos were actually real people. We reached out to a bunch of them, we found a bunch online. We were able to find 3 people who logged into Binance on those days, had created those accounts, and were actually part of the Binance KYC process. So what Platon told me is that he was a white hat, and that he had been trying to tell Binance that he had all this information, and he wanted to help them catch the people who stole all the Bitcoin from Binance earlier in May. I really had no reason not to believe him. But I also knew to trust no one. It was in Platon's best interest to convince me that he was a good guy, and it was in Binance's best interest to deflect my questions and make sure that nobody else could break in. So when I started talking to him, he called himself John Amate, or John Amate, or something like that. Then he called himself Gen M, G-E-N, Generation M or something. And then finally he was Natov Platon, which sounded like some kind of crazy Russian name. From what I could figure out, Platon was a younger person with a fairly solid grasp of written English. I had never spoken to him on the phone, and I never saw him on a Skype call. He also kept odd hours. I suspected he was living in Russia or the Ukraine, but he also could have been in China. One of the things I won't do is rush to publish damning information. I don't want to talk to a hacker and not tell Binance about it, or not tell the victim, right? If you were hacked, I would try to tell you about it, and then I would also try to get a good story out of it. So I reached out to Binance. I literally put the hacker and Binance in touch with each other. He wanted to be a white hat. He wanted to tell the story of how this happened, and he wanted to explain to them that, yeah, he had inside information on how this was happening. He tried it once without me. He was talking with Ted Lin, the CGO over there, and they blew him off. Because obviously Binance is dealing with this almost every day. They're dealing with hacks. They're dealing with people coming in saying, I have all your money, I won't give it back until you give me $1 million or whatever. And a lot of it's fake, so they had no idea how to handle this. Then I started talking with him, and I put him in touch with Binance as well, and we actually were in a chat room together, and I'm like, look, this guy has some legitimate information, I think you guys should look into it. And they were going back and forth, and it was almost, they were kind of dismissing him again. So I got to the point where it was very, very frustrating for me, because I'm trying to do the right thing. And if the story blew up because of that, I'm just fine. I might as well, I can just stop writing it. I'd much rather do that than have anybody else get hurt. Look, I mean, he gave me this information, he showed me what he had. It was abundantly clear that he wasn't trying to hide anything. And he was actually willing to show it to anybody who would ask, which is what drove me crazy. Could he have been doing some kind of social engineering that I wasn't following? It's entirely feasible, but also Binance was doing some social engineering by telling me or not telling me what was going on. When I was talking to Binance, they would point back to the original phishing hack that they said, and it wasn't their KYC. And I'm like, look, guys, this is essentially your KYC. This information is associated with this metadata that I have, and it's actually a big deal. And they blew that off as well. And I didn't actually want to go through the whole thing. I tried to confirm. When I started confirming that the KYC was real, then I knew that there was something here, and they just wouldn't admit it. They said that they had seen something like these leaked photos, but the only photos that I had, I sent Binance the photos that I had, and they hadn't said that they had seen these before. And further, Platon constantly said he has 60,000 of these. They claim they had 10,000 had leaked. So I'm not sure who to believe. The only response that they had when they talked about this was they sent me other stuff on other websites about news stories about a phishing attack. So their response was, yeah, this happened to us, maybe, we don't know, but don't worry about it so much, it's not a big deal. If a hacker comes to me and says, I know exactly where your 7,000 Bitcoin are, and I would like a bug bounty, or I would like to help you guys find it for a fee, and I'm a big company like Binance, I have no idea what I would do. Historically, what you do there is you kind of try to work with the hacker, and then also try to get them on a flight to some place where you have extradition rights, and put him in jail. This guy wasn't worried about that, interestingly enough. I kind of warned him about those kind of situations. That's exactly what could happen. And he wasn't worried about it, so he was very cavalier about the whole thing. The biggest thing for the industry, the larger trend, is pretty simple. We're at the next level of exchange security, and catch as catch can doesn't cut it anymore. You can't use third parties, it all has to be internal. People were asking on Twitter, why didn't Binance use the blockchain? As we well know, adding blockchain to something doesn't make it more secure. I would like to see a far more rigorous system of security when it comes to the exchanges, because the only people who are going to be using exchanges are people who don't know how to use their own wallets, how to use hardware wallets, etc. And those are quote-unquote mom-and-pop investors. We have to give those people some sort of security and understanding that, yeah, if I don't keep it in a safe in my backyard buried underneath the old oak tree, then I want to at least know that Binance isn't going to leak all my information. I'm not going to be looking at somebody's passport that I know. The implication for people using Binance is that we're in a situation where Binance is not to be trusted with your KYC information until they basically clear up the processes. What does make things more secure is what banks have already figured out, that spending money on security and security protocols can really lock down a system. But that process, all that lockdown, also adds layers of messy control over a system that's supposed to be streamlined and simple. Crypto was supposed to replace banks. Now crypto exchanges are becoming banks. I heard CZ didn't like my story, and I'm sorry. I'm a journalist, I'm not a PR guy for CZ. He and I can hug it out, or we can have a fist fight, or whatever needs to happen. But it's hard to be a journalist and write about crazy stuff that happens online and not upset guys like CZ.